CBC News has learned Canada quietly hosted a meeting right here in the capital with officials from North Korea. Katie Simpson is here with the details. Hey, Katie, thanks for being with us. What can you tell us about this meeting?
So this happened back in September, and there's a lot of attention right now on Kim Jong-un, who actually just showed up in Beijing for a 3-day meeting with China. It's expected he and Chinese officials are going to try and hash out some details for a possible another summit with U.S. President Donald Trump. Of course, the ultimate goal for the West and for the region is denuclearization of North Korea. And we have learned that Canada is quietly pushing that agenda and did so in a series of meetings held here in Ottawa with some North Korean officials who traveled to Canada back in September. A government source briefed me today and informed me that it was a delegation, 5 people. The most senior person was at the Director General level. They met with Canadian bureaucrats again back in September, and there were 2 main issues on the agenda from Canada's perspective. One was to push for denuclearization, which is something Canada does very publicly. The other is to push for greater support and greater respect of human rights in North Korea. When Canada does, it's rare that Canadian officials did have this conversation with these North Korean officials. There's not a lot of communication because there isn't a well-established channel of communication, because Canada has a policy right now. It's called it's a limited engagement policy that Canada limits how much contact it does have with North Korea. We spoke with James Trottier, who is a former Canadian diplomat who led 4 Canadian delegations into North Korea. He says Canada needs to do more when it comes to opening up the lines of communications so that Canada can actually play a role in trying to ease these tensions.
What Canada's added value, as with other like-minded states, would be to provide our own sort of assessment and readout of developments in North Korea. That's our value added, because we would have first-hand knowledge about the developments in North Korea. So people would welcome Canada, I would say, and Canadian policymakers more at the table than they do now, because right now we have limited access and limited information. We have secondhand information.
Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland was not a part of these conversations. It was strictly at the bureaucratic level, but it's certainly interesting to learn that this delegation was here in Canada.
Do you have any sense of whether or not, or to what degree, Canada's message at these talks, whatever it may be, actually got through?
That's the big question, whether these officials went back to North Korea and shared any of Canada's concerns, because when it comes to the big global picture, Canada isn't the same force that the United States is. It's not the same force that China is. Canada doesn't play that same role on the world stage. It's also not seen as an intermediary because the United States does have its own sort of contacts in North Korea as well as with South Korea. But we spoke with Peter MacKay, who's a former foreign affairs minister under the previous Conservative government, and he says that any additional conversations with North Korea is a good thing, but any sort of expectations must be tempered.
Well, they're a threat throughout the region. They have been a horrible regime under several leaders, including the current leader, Kim Jong-un. And so, again, for perspective, we have to take a hard look as to what possible outcomes could be achieved.
And there are no plans right now, Vashi, for Canada to return the favor and send any officials over to North Korea.
All right, thank you, Katie. Interesting story. I appreciate it. CBC's Katie Simpson. So why would Canada arrange this meeting? Marius Grenius is a former Canadian ambassador to South and North Korea. He's now a fellow at the Canadian Global Affairs Institute. Hi, Mr. Grenius. Nice to see you again.
Good. Same.
Thank you for coming in. So you just heard the details from Katie's story. How significant from your perspective is it?
Well, it's first of all, it's really nice to see that Canada is trying to do something, because Canada has been marginalized for so long under the Harper Wright controlled engagement policy, which this current government has continued. And I certainly agree with what James Trottier said, in the sense that if we don't see for ourselves, that means we have to rely on other people telling us what's happening, and that's, hey, we're a G7 country, and Trump has met with Kim Jong-un. South Korean President Moon has met 3 times so far. Germany, United Kingdom, both have embassies in Pyongyang, and quite frankly, we just have not been a player. So this meeting, I hope, is the start of a better dialogue, a serious dialogue where we can hopefully contribute. And that's beyond human rights and conveying non-proliferation issues.
Was there a time during which, I mean, you've spoken before about sort of this change in 2010 that's been continued by this government. Was there a time at which we did have that kind of influence?
Well, I think so. First of all, it was really important going back to about 2002 when we decided to support South Korea President at that time, Kim Dae-jung, to open up with Sunshine Policy. And we were very supportive of South Korea's opening steps. Things didn't go entirely right, and there has been, of course, the back and forth. But at that time, for instance, I was cross-accredited both from Seoul to Pyongyang and went to Pyongyang a number of times, 4 times, and had official discussions with senior officials, including the number 2 of the country. And people, the United States, South Korea, Japan, and others were actually, and China, were particularly interested in what Canada had to say and my own impressions. I'd go through Beijing to go to Pyongyang, and Chinese think tanks plus their ministry always welcomed me to and had substantive discussions.
Does it require a policy shift to bring back that level of influence, or is a meeting like this convened here in Canada without a policy shift evidence that that's not necessary?
Well, we heard that the Canadian officials talked human rights, which is a good thing, and certainly non-proliferation. We don't know how that message, the Canadian message, is going to be conveyed back to Pyongyang. And we also don't know at this point exactly what the North Koreans were seeking. And that of course, I think will influence the type of discussion and the sort of decisions Canada, the government of Canada, will have to make for the future. But I think at least it's a little start, a modest start, and let's see how it proceeds.
What's your read on North Korea right now, and especially its relationship with, for example, the United States, efforts to, or lack thereof, to denuclearize? I mean, it feels like a bit of a bouncing ball that we've been following for the past year. Lots of optimism after that meeting, tempered a little bit thereafter. There's a letter that came last week. What's your read?
Well, 2018 was just a frenzy of, first of all, of summits, and also of declarations, including the statement by Trump and Supreme Leader Kim. So again, expectations were raised, but then, quite honestly, on the denuclearization side, and we don't even know how that is defined or how it's really interpreted by the North Koreans. Nothing has happened since that meeting in June. So again, it'll be really interesting to see what happens at the next meeting. But in the meantime, I think when Trump and Pompeo says, "Oh, everything is fine and we're really making progress," well, that's not true. So maybe Canada, from that sense, can help, give a little push, give whatever aid that we can do.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Grunius. Appreciate your insight
pleasure.
today.